There was a man I once knew who had everything mapped out on paper. He had his goals written down, his action steps numbered, his timeline clearly marked. Every Sunday night, he'd review his plan for the week ahead. Every Monday morning, he'd wake up with the best intentions. And every Monday afternoon, he'd find himself doing something entirely different because, well, he just didn't feel like following through. 6 months later, that paper sat in a drawer, and his dreams sat right there with it. This happens more often than we'd like to admit. We set plans when we're feeling inspired, motivated, pumped up about our future. Then Tuesday arrives. It's raining. We didn't sleep well. Someone said something that bothered us. The coffee doesn't taste right. And suddenly, that plan we made feels like someone else's idea. The mood has shifted, and when the mood shifts, the plan gets abandoned. Here's something I learned after decades of watching people succeed and fail. Your feelings are the worst possible compass for your life. They change with the weather, with your blood sugar, with a comment someone made in passing. If you're going to let your emotions run your day, you might as well let a slot machine make your decisions. At least the slot machine is honest about being random. I remember a specific Thursday morning. I can still see it clearly. I had scheduled myself to work on a project that mattered, something that would move my business forward significantly. I woke up, and everything in me said no, not today. I felt heavy, uninspired, irritated by the mere thought of sitting down to do the work. Every cell in my body was voting for the couch, for easy tasks, for anything but what I had planned. But here's what I did instead. I made myself a deal. I told myself, just start, give it 30 minutes. If after 30 minutes you still feel this way, you can stop. I began. And something remarkable happened, not immediately, but gradually. The resistance melted, the work started flowing. By the end of that day, I had completed something significant, something that changed the trajectory of my business for years to come. If I had honored my mood that morning, none of it would have happened. That's when I understood the real difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs work when they feel like it. Professionals work according to the plan. Amateurs wait for inspiration. Professionals create on schedule. Amateurs need to feel motivated before they act. Professionals act their way into motivation. The amateur says, I'll do it when I'm in the right mood. The professional says, I'll do it, and the mood will follow. Think about the best athletes in the world. Do they train only when they feel like it? The best writers, do they write only when inspiration strikes? The most successful entrepreneurs, do they make sales calls only on days when they're feeling confident? Of course not. They have a plan, a routine, a commitment that exists independent of their emotional weather pattern. Your emotions will tell you all sorts of lies. They'll tell you that you're too tired, too busy, too stressed, too unprepared. They'll tell you that one day off won't matter, that you can start tomorrow, that circumstances aren't quite right yet. And if you listen to these voices, you'll wake up a year from now, 5 years from now, wondering where all the time went and why your life looks exactly the same. The truth about feelings is this: they're followers, not leaders. They will eventually align with your actions, but they rarely lead you toward your goals. If you wait to feel like doing what matters, you'll spend most of your life waiting. Success doesn't accommodate your mood. The market doesn't care if you're feeling motivated. Time doesn't pause because you're not in the right headspace. I've watched people with enormous talent accomplish nothing because they couldn't separate their plans from their moods. I've also watched people with modest talent build remarkable lives because they understood one simple principle. You do what you plan to do, regardless of how you feel about doing it. That's not being rigid or harsh with yourself. That's being reliable. That's being the kind of person who can be counted on first and foremost by yourself. When you make a plan and then abandon it because your mood changed, something damaging happens beneath the surface. You teach yourself that your commitments don't really matter. You train yourself to be unreliable. Each time you break a promise to yourself, you weaken the trust you have in your own word. And eventually, even when you make plans, a part of you knows you won't follow through. That's a dangerous place to live. But when you honor your plan despite your mood, something powerful happens. You build evidence that you're someone who does what they say they'll do. You strengthen the part of you that can endure temporary discomfort for long-term gain. You prove to yourself that feelings are just feelings. They come and go, but your character remains. The commitment you make to yourself is sacred ground. When you set a plan, you're making a promise about who you intend to be, not just what you intend to do. And every single time you have a choice between honoring that plan or honoring your mood, you're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. Vote enough times for your mood, and you become someone who can't be trusted with their own dreams. Vote enough times for your plan, and you become someone who makes things happen regardless of circumstances. This isn't about being perfect. There will be days when genuine rest is needed, when plans must adapt to real emergencies, when flexibility serves you better than rigidity. But be honest with yourself about the difference between a legitimate change of course and simple mood-driven avoidance. The voice that says, "I don't feel like it," is not the same as the voice that says, "This genuinely needs to change." Success belongs to those who can make themselves do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, whether they feel like doing it or not. Everything else is just conversation about success. The doing, that's where life changes. And the doing happens when you follow your plan, not your mood. Now, before we go any further, we need to address something critical. When I talk about following your plan instead of your mood, I'm assuming you actually have a plan worth following. And here's where most people run into their first real problem. They think they have a plan when what they really have is a vague wish dressed up in nice words. I met a woman at a seminar once who told me she had a plan to lose weight. I asked her to tell me about it. She said, "I'm going to eat better and exercise more." I asked her what better meant specifically. She wasn't sure. I asked her when she would exercise and for how long. She said whenever she could fit it in. I asked her how she'd know if she was making progress. She said she'd just feel better and see results. That's not a plan. That's hope wearing a disguise. A real plan has bones. It has structure. It's specific enough that a stranger could pick it up and execute it without having to guess what you meant. When I say I'm going to write, a plan says every morning at 6 o'clock for 90 minutes, at my desk, on the book project, minimum 500 words. That's a plan. I'm going to write more. It's just a pleasant thought floating through your mind. The difference matters enormously because you cannot follow something that isn't clearly defined. Your mood will always win against vagueness. When your plan is fuzzy, your feelings will fill in the blanks, and they'll always fill them in with the path of least resistance. But when your plan is concrete, when it specifies exactly what you'll do, when you'll do it, where you'll do it, and how you'll measure it, then you have something you can actually commit to. I learned this lesson the hard way in my early 20s. I was working a job I didn't particularly enjoy, and I kept telling myself I had a plan to build something better. I was going to start a business. I was going to read more books. I was going to develop new skills. I was going to save money. I had all these beautiful intentions. And at the end of each month, when I looked at my life, nothing had changed. Not one thing. The problem wasn't that I was lazy. The problem was that I was confusing activity with accomplishment. I was busy all the time, doing things that felt productive but weren't connected to any clear outcome. I'd read a chapter here, save a few dollars there, think about business ideas on my lunch break, but none of it was coordinated. None of it was building towards something specific. I was like a person hammering nails randomly into boards and wondering why a house wasn't appearing. Then someone asked me a question that changed everything. If you keep doing exactly what you're doing now, where will you be in 5 years? I sat with that question. I really thought about it. And the answer terrified me. I'd be in the same place, maybe a little older and more frustrated, but fundamentally unchanged. That's when I realized that drifting doesn't take you anywhere good. Only a clear plan, followed consistently, creates actual progress. So I started over. But this time, I built a real plan. I decided I would read 30 minutes every morning before work, not just when I felt like it, not just interesting parts, but 30 solid minutes of educational material that would improve my skills. I decided I would save 15% of every paycheck, not whatever was left over, but 15% right off the top before I spent anything else. I decided I would spend 2 hours every Saturday morning working on business ideas, testing them, learning what worked and what didn't. Nothing about that plan was exciting. Nothing about it was particularly clever or innovative. But it was specific. It was measurable. It was scheduled. And most importantly, it didn't require me to feel motivated. It just required me to do what I said I'd do when I said I'd do it. The results didn't come immediately, and that's another reason why most people abandon their plans. We live in a world that has taught us to expect instant results. We want to work out once and see muscle definition. We want to save for a month and have financial security. We want to practice a skill for a week and be an expert. And when those instant results don't materialize, we convince ourselves the plan isn't working. But here's what actually happens when you follow a real plan consistently. Nothing, 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 something, nothing, nothing, something, something, nothing, something, something, something. The results compound so slowly at first that they're almost invisible. You read 30 minutes a day for a month, and you don't feel dramatically smarter. You save 15% for 3 months, and you don't feel rich. You work on your business idea for 6 Saturdays, and you don't have a thriving company. This is where the gap between knowing and doing becomes a canyon. Everyone knows what to do. Eat less, move more, save money, read books, practice skills, build relationships, show up consistently. The information isn't hidden, the steps aren't secret. But knowing what to do and actually doing it, especially when you don't see immediate results, that's where most people fall off the path. And here's the seductive trap that catches almost everyone: waiting. Waiting until you're ready. Waiting until you know more. Waiting until circumstances improve. Waiting until you feel motivated. Waiting until Monday, till next month, till after the holidays, till the kids are older, till you're less busy, till you have more money, till you feel more confident. All that waiting is just fear dressed up in practical sounding excuses. The truth is, you'll never feel completely ready. You'll never have perfect circumstances. You'll never feel motivated every single day. If you're waiting for those conditions before you follow your plan, you're really just planning to wait forever. I've seen people spend years preparing to start, gathering information, taking courses, reading books, making lists, refining their approach, waiting for the perfect moment, and while they're preparing, someone else with half their knowledge and twice their commitment is out there actually doing the work, making mistakes, learning, adjusting, and moving forward. The plan isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to be followed. You'll adjust it as you go. You'll learn what works and what doesn't. But you can only learn those lessons by doing, not by planning to plan or preparing to prepare. At some point, you have to close the books, stop the research, end the planning phase, and start executing. Here's something else about plans that most people don't understand. The real value isn't just in the outcome you're trying to achieve. The real value is in who you become by following through. When you commit to reading 30 minutes every morning and you actually do it for 6 months straight, you don't just gain knowledge from those books. You gain something far more valuable. You become someone who keeps commitments. You become someone who honors their word. You become someone who can be counted on to do difficult things when they're not convenient. That transformation, that shift in identity, is worth more than any single goal you might accomplish. Because once you're that kind of person, you can accomplish anything you set your mind to. The specific goal almost doesn't matter. What matters is building the character, the discipline, the reliability that makes any goal achievable. So when you're building your plan, make it specific. Write it down. Don't let it live only in your head where it can shapeshift every time your mood changes. Put it on paper. Include the details. What will you do? When will you do it? Where will you do it? How will you measure progress? What will you do when obstacles arise? What will you do when you don't feel like doing it? That last question is the most important one. Your plan must include a plan for the days when you don't want to follow the plan, because those days will come. They'll come often. And if you haven't already decided what you'll do on those days, you'll make the decision in the moment, and your feelings will make it for you. The people who build remarkable lives aren't remarkable because they have better feelings than everyone else. They're remarkable because they have better plans, and they follow those plans regardless of their feelings. That's the whole game. Everything else is just details. Every single day, whether you realize it or not, you're fighting a battle. It's not a battle against other people or external circumstances. It's a battle between two powerful forces inside you, the force pulling you toward comfort and the force calling you toward commitment. And whichever force you feed whichever force you give in to more often, that's the force that will shape your entire life. Comfort is seductive. Comfort whispers sweet things in your ear. It tells you that you've worked hard enough, that you deserve a break, that one day off won't hurt anything, that you can always start again tomorrow. Comfort is the voice that says, sleep in just this once, skip the workout today, have that extra dessert, watch one more episode, put off that difficult conversation, avoid that challenging task. And the thing about comfort is that it's not lying to you, not entirely. You probably could use a break. One day probably won't destroy everything. You can start again tomorrow. But here's what comfort doesn't tell you. It's never satisfied. Give comfort an inch, and it will take your entire life. Let it win today, and it will be back tomorrow with the same arguments, the same excuses, the same seductive logic. Comfort doesn't want you to rest occasionally. It wants you to quit permanently. It just doesn't say that part out loud. I'll never forget a moment that taught me this lesson in a way I couldn't ignore. I had committed to waking up early to work on a project that mattered deeply to me. This wasn't just some casual goal. It was something I believed could change the direction of my career and my life. I set my alarm for 5 in the morning. I went to bed with clear intentions. I was ready. Then 5 o'clock came. And in that moment, in those first few seconds of consciousness, I experienced what I can only describe as a full-scale negotiation with myself. Part of me immediately started arguing, you didn't sleep well. You'll be more productive if you rest another hour. Your body is telling you something. Listen to your body. Besides, you worked late yesterday. You've earned this. You can work on the project this afternoon when you're fresh. Every single argument sounded perfectly reasonable. And here's the dangerous part, they were reasonable. I didn't sleep great. I would be more rested with another hour. I did work late the previous day. Those facts were all true. But they were also completely irrelevant to the real question at hand. The real question wasn't whether I was tired or whether the arguments made logical sense. The real question was, am I going to be someone who does what I said I'd do, or am I going to be someone who negotiates with myself every time it's uncomfortable? I got up. I made myself get up. And it felt terrible for about 15 minutes. My body was heavy. My mind was foggy. Everything in me wanted to be back in that bed. But then something shifted. The resistance faded. The work began to flow. And by 7 o'clock that morning, I had accomplished more than I typically did in an entire afternoon. But more than the work itself, I had won the real battle. I had proven to myself that my commitments were stronger than my comfort. That's the thing about this battle. Every time you choose commitment over comfort, you make the next choice a little easier. Every time you choose comfort over commitment, you make the next choice a little harder. You're not just making a decision about today. You're casting a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. The voice of rationalization is perhaps the most dangerous voice you'll ever hear because it sounds so sensible. It doesn't sound like weakness or laziness. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like self-care. It sounds like intelligent adjustment to circumstances. But rationalization is really just comfort wearing a disguise, using fancy words to justify breaking your promises to yourself. When you skip your workout because you're tired, rationalization says that's listening to your body. When you avoid a difficult conversation because the timing isn't perfect, rationalization says that's being strategic. When you break your diet because it's a special occasion, rationalization says that's being flexible and not too rigid. When you don't work on your business because you had a long day at your job, rationalization says that's being realistic about your limits. And maybe occasionally those things are true, but be brutally honest with yourself about the pattern. If you're listening to your body 5 days a week, you're not listening to your body, you're avoiding discomfort. If the timing is never quite perfect for difficult conversations, you're not being strategic, you're being avoidant. If every other day is a special occasion, you're not being flexible, you're being undisciplined. The cost of consistently choosing comfort over commitment is enormous, but it's paid in a currency that's hard to notice day by day. You don't wake up one morning having suddenly lost everything. You wake up 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later, and your life looks almost exactly the same as it did before. Same weight. Same bank account, same relationships, same job, same frustrations, same unfulfilled dreams. And the worst part isn't even the lack of external progress. The worst part is what happens internally. Every time you choose comfort over commitment, you lose a little bit of respect for yourself. You can't hide from yourself. You know when you're keeping your promises and when you're breaking them. You know when you're being disciplined and when you're taking the easy way out. And that knowledge accumulates. Over time, you start to lose trust in your own word. When you tell yourself you're going to do something, a voice in the back of your mind whispers, "Yeah, right." We both know you won't actually do that. And that voice is backed by evidence. All those times you didn't follow through, all those commitments you abandoned when they got uncomfortable, all those plans you let your mood overrule. That's a painful place to exist. Not trusting yourself, not believing in your own promises. It creates a kind of internal cynicism that's hard to shake. It makes future goals feel pointless because some part of you already knows you won't see them through. That's when people start saying things like, "I'm just not a disciplined person," or "I'm not good at following through," or "that's just not who I am," and they believe it because they've created years of evidence to support it. But here's the remarkable truth. The opposite is also possible. Just as choosing comfort repeatedly makes you someone who can't be trusted, choosing commitment repeatedly makes you someone who absolutely can be trusted first and foremost by yourself. When you do the hard thing, when you don't feel like it, when you keep your promise to yourself despite the discomfort, when you follow your plan even though every fiber of your being is voting for the couch, you make a deposit in your self-respect account. You build evidence that you're reliable. You strengthen the part of you that can delay gratification, that can endure temporary discomfort for long-term gain, that can do what matters instead of just what feels good. And that muscle, the discipline muscle, the commitment muscle, the do-it-anyway muscle, it gets stronger with use. The first few times you choose commitment over comfort, it feels monumental. It requires enormous willpower. It's a battle every single time. But keep choosing it, keep doing it, and something remarkable happens. It starts to become part of your identity. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through. The internal negotiation gets shorter. The voice of rationalization loses its power, not because you don't hear it anymore, but because you've built a stronger counter voice that says, "That's not who I am. I'm someone who does what I say I'll do." This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens in 1,000 small moments when nobody's watching, when nobody would know if you took the easy path, when there are no immediate consequences for breaking your commitment. Those are the moments that matter most. Those are the moments when you're building or destroying your character. The battle between comfort and commitment never ends. Even people who have built extraordinary discipline still face it. But the difference is, they've won enough battles that they trust themselves to win the next one. They've proven to themselves over and over that they're capable of doing uncomfortable things, that their commitments matter more than their momentary feelings, that they're the kind of person who sees things through. That's the person your plan requires you to become. Not someone who never feels uncomfortable. Not someone who doesn't hear the voice of rationalization, but someone who feels it all, hears it all, and chooses commitment anyway. That's where real power lives. That's where your future is built. One uncomfortable choice at a time. There's something profound that happens when you consistently follow your plan despite your mood, something that goes far deeper than achieving the specific goal you set out to accomplish. The goal itself, whether it's building a business, losing weight, writing a book, or saving money, that's almost secondary to the real transformation taking place. What's really happening is that you're becoming a different person. And that shift in who you are, that's where the real treasure lies. I knew a man who decided he was going to run a marathon. He'd never been a runner. He wasn't athletic. He was carrying extra weight and dealing with all the doubts that come with starting something completely outside your comfort zone, but he made a plan. He'd run 3 days a week, following a beginner's training program, gradually building up his distance and endurance. The first few weeks were brutal. His body hurt. He felt slow and awkward. He wanted to quit constantly, but he kept following the plan 3 days a week, no matter what. Rain, shine, tired, energized, didn't matter. The plan said run, so he ran. Months went by. His body changed, but that wasn't the most important change. His mind changed. His sense of himself changed. He started to see himself as someone who finishes what he starts, someone who can endure discomfort, someone who keeps promises. When he finally crossed that finish line at the marathon, completing all 26.2 miles, something interesting happened. He told me later that the accomplishment itself was wonderful, but what meant more was realizing he had become the kind of person who could set an audacious goal and see it through. That identity shift from someone who starts things and quits when they get hard to someone who commits and completes that transformation rippled into every other area of his life. This is what I've been trying to help people understand for years. Success isn't really about getting things. It's about becoming someone. The house, the income, the achievements, the recognition, those are just byproducts. The real prize is who you have to become to earn those things. Because once you become that person, you can create anything you want. The specific goal almost becomes irrelevant once you've developed the character to achieve goal. Think about it this way. If someone handed you $1 million right now, but you remained exactly who you are today, how long would that money last? If you don't have the discipline, the wisdom, the habits, the mindset of someone who builds and maintains wealth, that money would slip through your fingers. We've all heard the stories of lottery winners who end up broke. They got the prize without becoming the person who could keep the prize. But if you become the kind of person who lives below their means, who saves consistently, who invests wisely, who makes disciplined financial decisions even when it's uncomfortable, you might not have $1 million today, but you're becoming someone who will build wealth and keep it. The becoming is more valuable than the having. Your plan, when you really understand it, is never just about the external outcome. It's a blueprint for personal transformation. When you commit to working out 5 days a week, you're not just planning to get fit. You're planning to become someone who honors their commitments, someone who can be uncomfortable and keep going, someone who values their long-term well-being over their short-term cravings. When you commit to reading educational material every day, you're not just planning to gain knowledge, you're becoming someone who invests in themselves, someone who's always growing, someone who recognizes that learning never stops. When you commit to saving a portion of every paycheck, you're not just planning to have more money, you're becoming someone who thinks long-term, someone who can delay gratification, someone who's building security for themselves and their family. The plan is the vehicle, but the transformation is the destination. And here's what makes this so powerful. Once you've become that person, once you've built that character, it stays with you. Economic conditions can take your money. Health problems can affect your body. Life circumstances can change your situation. But who you've become, the character you've built, the discipline you've developed, that's yours forever. Nobody can take that away. This is also why following your plan matters, even on days when the specific task seems pointless. Maybe you're building a business and you've committed to making 10 sales calls every day. Some days, all 10 calls lead nowhere. No sales, no progress, just rejection after rejection. Your mood says this is a waste of time. Your feelings say stop doing something that isn't working. But if you've committed to making those calls, you make them anyway. Not because that particular day will change your business, but because you're becoming someone who does what they said they do, regardless of immediate results. That person, that character you're building, that's what will eventually create the breakthrough. There's also something deeply meaningful about living with integrity. Not integrity in the sense of moral righteousness, but integrity in the original sense of the word wholeness, being integrated, being the same person all the way through. When what you say matches what you do, when your plans align with your actions, when your commitments are honored regardless of your feelings, you live with a kind of internal peace that's rare in this world. Most people are fragmented. They say one thing and do another. They make plans and break them. They set goals and abandon them. They live in constant conflict between who they want to be and who they're actually being. That internal conflict creates a low-level anxiety that becomes the background noise of their entire life. But when you become someone who follows your plan regardless of your mood, that conflict dissolves. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop wondering if you'll follow through. You know you will because that's who you are. That certainty, that integration, that wholeness, it's one of the most valuable things you can build in your life. And here's the final thing I want you to understand. This matters beyond just your own life. When you become someone who honors their commitments, who follows through on their plans, who can be counted on regardless of circumstances, you inspire everyone around you. Your children see it. Your spouse sees it. Your colleagues see it. Your friends see it. And without you saying a word about discipline or commitment or following plans, you give them permission to believe that kind of life is possible for them too. The world is full of people making excuses, blaming circumstances, waiting for the perfect moment, following their moods instead of their plans. When you live differently, when you become someone who does what matters, regardless of how you feel, you stand as living proof that another way exists. That's a legacy worth building. So the question isn't really whether you'll follow your plan today. The question is, who are you becoming? With every choice, every action, every moment you choose, commitment over comfort, you're answering that question. Make sure you're becoming someone you'll be proud to be. Make sure you're becoming someone you can count on. Make sure you're becoming someone your future self will thank. That future starts right now, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Right now, this moment, this choice. Follow the plan you set, not the mood you're in. Everything else will follow.